Welcome to Adult Education. This is Sunday, March 7th, 2021. It is a good day to be here, and I'm really glad that we're all here together. Let us pray. Holy and gracious God, we give thanks for the obligations and gifts you place on us, the gift and obligation of each other. Thank you for calling us to love one another and reminding us that when we love one another, we love you. That when we do good to one another, we are doing good to you. Help us to see your face, your image in all our siblings, so that in seeing you, we may see all that is good in this world. Amen. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Bill McConnell. Bill, I don't have your bio in front of me, so I'm going to try this really quick. You are the regional mission specialist for the Midwest.
That's close. I can talk a little bit about it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Today we are going to be learning a little bit more about becoming a Matthew 25 congregation, what the Matthew 25 initiative is, and what's going on with the denomination and how we can be connected to each other. So Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to mute myself.
All right. Thanks so much. And it's great to be with you today. And I'm coming from Louisville, Kentucky, and it's a beautiful Sunday morning here. My name is Bill McConnell. I'm a mission engagement advisor with the Presbyterian Mission Agency. And part of that position, and my main position, is to serve as what I would refer to as a conduit between what's going on in the local church and at the Presbyterian Synod levels, to connect all of those things with what's going on at the national church, both on the national and international levels. Part of that is the Matthew 25 invitation. And so, and one little more about me. Let's see. I'm a lifelong Presbyterian. I'm a ruling elder. I just finished 2 consecutive 3-year terms on the session of Highland Presbyterian Church in Louisville. So I'm in my 1-year sabbatical. How that's going to work, I have no idea. But because I tend not to sit back very easily. But I've been in this position for about 5 years. Prior to this, I was the executive director of the Presbyterian Association of Musicians. So I worked, have been in Louisville for about 10 years. Originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, grew up in the Presbyterian Church. So I my blood runneth Calvinist. But the Matthew 25 invitation is something that has become an important part of who we are as Presbyterians, and I'm going to share my screen, and so if you'll just give me a second to do that. Let's see, here we go. If it'll let me do that, perfect. So far, so good. One other thing here, because I will have a video clip a little later in the presentation. Come on. There we go. But the Matthew 25 invitation allows us to be actively engaged in the world. And I hope what you're seeing is a full screen of Matthew 25. If not, please let out a yell, because I won't be able to see you, but I can hear you. So Matthew 25 as a concept really grew from the 2016 General Assembly. And I don't know about you, the 2000 General Assembly was the assembly in Detroit, and it was an assembly where there was a lot of discussion about some fairly contentious issues. And one of the things that was discussed, and maybe not the most contentious of the issues, but was the question of what the church should do in response to social witness issues, to issues of race, of poverty, of other issues within the world. And there were discussions of how the church should respond, when the church should respond, and how quickly the church should respond. So as a result of that, the 226th General Assembly passed an overture that was titled "On Choosing to be a Church Committed to the Gospel of Matthew 25." Came from Cascades Presbytery, which is the Portland, Oregon area, with concurrences at Hudson River, which is in New York State, and Long Island in New York State, Monmouth in Illinois, National Capital in the District of Columbia, and Shepherds of Lapsley, which is the Birmingham area of Alabama. And what that overture said was that we as a church would commit to being the kind of church that Jesus called for in Matthew 25. Now, when I first heard about this, I will make a confession. I'm a church musician, have been since I was knee high, and so a lot of my Sunday school years were spent at the organ or at the piano getting ready for the worship service. So I wasn't always in Sunday school. So when somebody just immediately says Matthew 25, I did not immediately know what they were talking about. So I will admit that. But when I went to look at it, I fully understood the concept. And the portion that we focused on is the last third. There are actually three very important and honestly difficult stories or ideas within Matthew 25. But the Matthew 25 invitation begins with the last third. So I want to read that. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people from one another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. Then he will say to those at his left hand, You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me, naked, and you did not give me clothing, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger, or naked or sick or in prison, and did not take care of you? Then he will answer them, Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to me, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So it's a difficult passage, a passage that brings up all kinds of issues of who we are as a church, who we are as Christians, and what God has called us to do and to be. But as a church, we found that it was a way to focus who we are, to celebrate things that we're already doing, to understand what we're doing in the context of Jesus' commands. So as we looked at it as within the Presbyterian Mission Agency, we were giving thought to our own mission work plan. How did we organize who we were going to be and how we were going to address the call of God on the church and our role within the church as the mission arm of the PCUSA. So from within that, we came up with three concepts, three things that seem to permeate Matthew 25. One of those was the concept of dismantling structural racism. The second, eradicating systemic poverty. And finally, building congregational vitality. All three important, all three often interdependent. And I will tell you that originally the order of these was a little different from what I present, and building congregational vitality was first, and it could be first, because from a vital congregation we can work toward the other two. But I also find that as we work toward dismantling racism, eradicating poverty, we become more of a vital congregation. We become more energetic. We find more fulfillment in our work for the gospel. So as you see, the three concepts really work together. They're interdependent. They're integral to each other. Now let's talk about some definitions, because I think it's important to realize that we're talking here about systems. We're not, while things like when we talk about poverty, we're, soup kitchens, closed closets, those sorts of things, food pantries are very, very important. But what we're talking here are about the systems that permeate our society. One of the things that my boss, the Reverend Diane Moffat, who is our executive director, says is that if you're walking by a stream and you see one fish lying dead on the side of the stream, you wonder what's wrong with the fish. But if you're walking along that same stream and you see a school of fish that are lying dead on the shore, you start wondering what's wrong with the water. So we're talking here about trying to address what's wrong with the water. Now, so we're all on the same page in terms of definitions. When we talk about structural racism and white privilege, we're talking about laws, policies, and practices that structure, reinforce, and perpetuate discrimination, bias, prejudice, and oppression of people of color. Those sorts of things can find their ways into all sorts of areas within our society. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. There is an imaginary line in Louisville, Kentucky that is at 9th Street. East of 9th Street is a predominantly, maybe not predominantly white area, but it is certainly a more affluent area of the city. West of 9th Street, the economic level of the community drops dramatically within just a few feet. You can almost see the change. And so it's things like that, things that have been created that create oppression, prejudice, and discrimination. When we talk about systemic poverty, we're talking about the economic exploitation of people who are poor through laws, policies, practices, and systems that perpetuate the impoverished status. As I said, things like food pantries are incredibly important. Things like soup kitchens, things like meals that are provided by many churches for the poor within their communities. Those are incredibly important. But what we're trying to address here is, why are the people poor to start with? Why are they hungry? What are the things that are causing those issues? So we're talking more than just the individual symptom. We're talking about the system. And then with congregational vitality, to intentionally and continuously develop in faith and actively engage the community. Again, hearkening back to Diane Moffat's thoughts, one of the questions she often asks is, if your church were to close, who besides the people who are normally involved with your congregation would notice? It's a hard question. It's one that many congregations are having to answer. And I think as we move through vaccinations into hopefully moving back toward live and in-person worship, I think that's a question that we're really going to have to look at closely. Who notices that we're not here? And then if no one notices, there's a question of our own vitality. But if our ministry is active and engaged with those around us, then those who are around us do notice. The Matthew 25 invitation, and I will say that we try to use the word invitation because we're all good Presbyterians, and we know that in Presbyterian lingo, an initiative has check boxes, it has benchmarks, and trying to use this to think of Matthew 25 a little differently, but that Matthew 25 is theologically grounded because what we do matters to God. Earlier in Matthew, Jesus said, "Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, that person is like a person who built their house on a rock." And we also realize that the standard of judgment for all nations is how they care for those who sit on the margins of society. The Matthew 25 passage, Matthew 25:31 to 46, is in many versions of the Bible headlined or that section is titled "The Judgment of the Nations," and that's an important thing to think about. That it's talking about our systems, it's talking about our nation. And again in Matthew 25, "As you did until the least of these, my brothers and sisters, or until the least of these members of my family, you did it unto me." And we also acknowledge that Jesus is present with those who suffer. "As you did it unto the least of these, you did it to me." Because what we're realizing is that in what Jesus is commanding is that the center of ministry is at the margins. It's been said that Jesus did not come to necessarily to comfort the afflicted, but to afflict the comfortable, or that he actually came to do both, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, to move toward the margins. In addition to being theologically grounded, it is ecclesiastically affirmed. One of the things that we as Presbyterians ascribe to is the great ends of the church. If you put all 6 of those great ends together, we have the proclamation of the gospel for the salvation of humankind, the shelter, nurture, and spiritual fellowship of the children of God, the maintenance of divine worship, the preservation of the truth, the promotion of social righteousness, and the exhibition of the kingdom of God to the world. All of those things are what we call being the church. So if you think about the shelter, nurture, and spiritual fellowship of the children of God, the promotion of social righteousness, and the exhibition of the kingdom of heaven to the world, you see within those great ends Jesus' commands that we see in Matthew 25. So beginning about 2 years, almost exactly 2 years ago, we began the process of inviting congregations, mid-councils, presbyteries, and synods, and also other organizations within the church to join us in this Matthew 25 invitation to be the church in the world. Now, I checked these numbers this morning, and so as of this morning, there are 771 congregations who have accepted the Matthew 25 invitation. That's 8.3% of the 9,300, and that's a rough number, 9,300 congregations. 63 presbyteries, that's 37% of the current 170 presbyteries. Now there are some mergers of presbyteries that are in the works right now, so that percentage will probably change. But as of now, 63 presbyteries. 9 synods. We have 16 synods. 9 of the synods have accepted the Matthew 25 invitation. Your synod, the Synods of Lakes and Prairies, was if my memory is serving me correctly, they were the first synod to accept the invitation. And of course, with ruling elder Ilona Street Stewart as one of our co-moderators, she is definitely leading the charge. And then 39 other groups. That's colleges, church-related organizations, groups like some of our Presbyterian colleges and universities. Stillman College, which is one of our historically black colleges in in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, was one of the early adopters. Groups like Living Waters for the World, which does water projects around the world, which is affiliated with the Synod of Living Waters. Groups of that type. Also Pikeville University, several other universities, but those are our current statistics. And there are resources available. There are about Bible studies. Last year, in the liturgical calendar, happened to be the year of Matthew, so there were 2 volumes of liturgical and lectionary aids to assist with that, and also a website. So if you go to http://pcusa.org/Matthew25, it will take you to a lot of resources for all of the various focuses of Matthew 25, whatever your choice is. In addition to all of these, there's a hymn that's been written. I want to take a minute, play it for you. If you want to sing along, feel free. You're welcome to unmute or mute. Usually muted singing is a little easier to deal with, but I do want you to hear this. This was written by David Gambrell, who's my colleague in the office in the Presbyterian Mission Agency. It's being sung by Philip Morgan, who is the director of music at Central Presbyterian Church in Louisville. So just take a minute and listen.
with us today. Where there is hunger and thirst in the land, shatter the systems of greed. Jesus, be with us, make use of our hands, lift up your people in need. Jesus, be with us, help us each day to follow the gospel and live as we pray. Send us your spirit and show us your way. Jesus, be with us today. Where there is hatred because of our skin, break down the walls of our fear. Jesus, be with us to save us from sin. In your great love, draw us near. Jesus, be with us, help us each day to follow the gospel and live as we pray. Send us your spirit and show us your way. Jesus, be with us today. Where there are valleys of bones dry as dust, build up the body of Christ. Jesus, be with us and help us to trust. Teach us a new way of life. Jesus, be with us, help us each day to follow the gospel and live as we pray. Send out your spirit and show us your way. Jesus, be with us today. Send out your spirit and show us the way. Jesus, be with us today.
So what can you do? I know that you're considering accepting the Matthew 25 invitation. So what does that mean for your congregation? What I would encourage you to do as you think about that invitation is to think about what you're doing already. What are the ministries that you have in place that are living into the various focuses within the Matthew 25 invitation? How do those current ministries already address dismantling structural racism and white supremacy, eradicating systemic poverty, or building congregational vitality? I would wager that if you start looking at your own ministries, there are a lot that are already within those categories. And then look around you. What issues in your community continue to need attention? Those things are probably changing given the realities of COVID and what we've been through for this last year. And then once the session approves, to go to pcusa.org/Matthew25 and then register your acceptance of this invitation. Because when you do that, you'll receive some information, there's a startup pack with some thoughts, but also ways to connect with others who are doing the same thing, who are in ministry together. to continue to do what you're already doing and more, and then to share your stories with us. We would encourage you to send me, to send others information about the things that your congregation is doing, because we want to be able to celebrate those sorts of things with you. We want to be able to help you trumpet what you do, but also to allow others to see what you're doing so they can contact you and say, hey, we're thinking about a similar idea. How did you do it? Or you can do the same thing for others. And you can have conversations about things such as ideas that may have looked really good on paper but didn't quite pan out. Or you can have conversations about the happy surprises of things that you weren't expecting, of things that happened that really you didn't expect to happen. And finally, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you. When I meet with congregations and with presbyteries, I usually end my presentation with 3 asks, if you will. The first ask, the first request is that you pray for us. Pray for those of us in the mission agency and who are working both from Louisville and also around the world. We have about 75 mission co-workers in 40 countries. Some of them are slowly working their ways back to their countries of assignment and figuring out ways to do that safely in the midst of COVID and other issues that are going on in their countries. But also those of us who are working together, pray for us for safety, for guidance, for sensitivity to the Spirit. Second, I would invite you to engage with us. That means ask questions. That means if something doesn't make sense within the church, that you or Jeff or somebody contact me. Ask the question. There's nothing wrong with asking a question. I'm happy to help fill in the gaps of any information you might have, and I might not know the answer either. So I might have to do some research, and that's okay. I'm not the expert on everything, but I know some pretty darn good experts. And then the third thing is, as your passions are ignited by the things that are going on your behalf from the national church, I invite you to make financial commitments, both in your personal budgets and in your church budgets, for the work of the church, whether that's through contributions supporting our mission co-workers, or through Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, or the Hunger Program, or Self-Development of People, or any number of ministries that are going on your behalf. So those 3 things are important. But again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other, and I am perfect. I'm able to answer questions, or I can point you in the direction of answers, or I can let you know that I don't know the answer, and that I'll be happy to find out and get back to you. So are there thoughts or questions?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to open this up. And I will say, in terms of the Matthew 25 invitation, the mission committee has been wrestling with this question for a while now. And our tentative schedule, our plan is that there will be a vote from the mission committee as to whether or not we would like to accept this invitation. Now, obviously, that goes through session from there. But this is really helpful in our discernment as to what it is that we may be able to do and how we may be able to answer the call. And so as you think about questions that you may have for Bill, I encourage you to think of them not just in the abstract, but what does it mean for us? And so we do have a question. I'll moderate the Q&A portion here.
Okay.
Do you have some favorite examples of actions? Oh no, the chat just went away. Actions taken by congregations after accepting the invitation?
Let's see if I can think of some. I can. I'll tell you one that has been pretty amazing and exciting. The Presbytery of Shepherds and Lapsley, which is in Birmingham, Alabama, is a Matthew 25 presbytery, and one of their emphases has been in addressing issues of structural racism and white supremacy in Birmingham. So if you think about the coalescing of the history of Birmingham, and Montgomery is also in that presbytery. So the issues of racism that had been prominent in the Deep South, and they are making some amazing strides. Let's see. trying to think of some specifics. Um, keep going back to Shepherds and Lapsley because they're also working very closely with individual congregations to celebrate what the congregations are doing and using their website to do that. Um, and let's see. The specifics are leaving me at the moment, but I think that there have been congregations who have looked at the ways their buildings are being used. For example, is there a way that their building can be used to support areas or support organizations that are dealing with issues of white supremacy or of racism or of poverty, and learning how to do that, to use their space. There are lots of examples of collaborations between congregations that had never talked before, to look for ways to address issues within each other, and not just inviting folks of color into white churches, but that white churches being able to be involved with those of color, to move to participate in other congregations. I look at I'm thinking about in Louisville, Grace Covenant Presbyterian Church, which is an African American church, has done a lot of work in the area of poverty, and in terms of they are in one of Louisville's food deserts. There are no grocery stores or opportunities for fresh food anywhere close to that congregation. So ways to assist in gathering people together to help make food more available within their community. There are also some congregations that are doing microloans to small organizations that are working on those issues. And particular congregations are not coming up, but I will tell you that on the Matthew 25 website, there are specific stories. One thing that's happening also for example, at Knox Presbyterian Church in Cincinnati, one of the things they realized, they did a race audit. They were looking at themselves from a standpoint of their own racial history, and they realized that they received a bequest of about $200,000 about 100 years ago. So I mean, it was a huge bequest at the time for building their current building. And in the terms of that bequest was a statement that this money would be used for a church that will serve the white race. And like I said, they accepted the money 100 years ago. So they are struggling with how to, if you will, how to deal with the fact that they did accept that bequest, and how can they live above it, because the building's built, and they're not tearing down the building. So and the person who gave the funds was interred in a crypt in a niche in the building. So they're having to struggle with that. So it's some things that we consider the happy parts of ministry, and then other things when you realize we've got a problem here and we need to address race in our community, or we need to address poverty in our community. Those are just some things that come to mind.
That is a very different definition of structural racism than I've ever experienced. Very literal structural racism.
Exactly.
There's a question from Nancy about the Bible studies, asking, would those best be used prior to committing to the invitation, or would they be better used after accepting the invitation?
I think either or, because they're structured so that you can use. What they try to do is to dig deeper into Matthew 25 and look into the roots of what the scripture is talking about. So I would say both and, or in the midst of.
Wonderful. Thank you. And for the Adult Ed Committee, let's think about what we want to do this summer. Last summer, we did more of a coffee hour thing. Might be something that we would want to consider, is running some adult ed with some breakout rooms on Matthew 25. Are there other questions? I'm looking around. I'm sure I have a bunch, so I can keep asking, but I much rather hear what you have to say.
Oh, I did, and as I stopped talking long enough to think, there is a church, and I don't remember the name of the church, but it's in the Los Angeles area, that has taken on a homeless encampment as its ministry, and looking at not just why are these people living in tents, but also working with them on things like employment, like transportation to job interviews, looking for ways to help them arrange housing. So it's trying to look holistically at this homeless encampment, not as an eyesore, but as a symptom of systemic poverty, and helping that community of people to move out of that, move beyond it.
Very cool. Barb, I see your hand is up.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. This has been wonderful. Question, what are some of the most common, if you know, objections or concerns with churches who might be considering doing this from their congregation, and how have they been addressed?
Okay. Well, I mean, the things that immediately come to mind, and it was one of the questions that came up when we made this presentation first to Presbytery execs, which is why we kind of took out the word initiative, because they said, is this just one more thing that Louisville's telling us to do? And but what we have tried to do is to say, no, this is a celebration of what you're already doing. So that's one thing, is that I have heard people ask, well, okay, is this sort of the flavor of the month? Will this go away? And my sense from those that I work with is that no, this emphasis is going to continue. It might be adjusted. There might be ways that we adjust what we're talking about. But Matthew 25 is a critical piece within the gospel that tells us what we need to be doing. The other objection I got from a Presbyterian, and I won't tell you which one, it's not yours, but that the Presbyterian exec told me that her council was considering it, and but their main concern was that they were worried about signing on to an idea to a program or to an approach that wasn't their idea. And I said, well, I think it was Jesus's idea. And so that's what I'm hearing. I mean, we Presbyterians are a little bit, we're a little twitchy when it comes to things like something coming from above and telling us what to do. But hopefully this is a way to, because it came through several presbyteries, for us to celebrate who we are and what we're doing, and look for ways to do it better.
Thank you. So I'm going to use the dreaded P word and hope that we can all keep our hats on and keep our socks on. But when you move from individual services into dismantling structures and systems, it becomes inextricably linked with politics. Mm-hmm. Now, I won't use the other one, partisanship, but it is inextricably linked with politics. The systems, changing systems, is a political and communal action. At a time and in a culture where avoidance of politics is almost as much gospel as the gospel itself, how have you seen churches approach the topic of dismantling structural racism and eradicating systemic poverty? How have you seen churches approach that without also looking at it through a lens of partisan politics, which unfortunately happens to be the lens through which most things are viewed these days?
Well, and I would also add that to try to avoid looking at it politically, is a political statement. And so and Jesus didn't avoid being political. I think we have to remember that. But what I do see congregations doing is realizing that they can't bite off the whole. They have to be careful of how much they try to bite off. That if we want to talk about structural racism, we do have to talk about some issues. We do have to deal. And I grew up in the South. I grew up in and so it's taken me a while to realize that I was raised in a sea of racism. Now, were any members of my family members of the KKK? I don't think so. I don't know. Did my family benefit from the work of enslaved peoples? Probably, but I don't know it specifically. But the issue is that it's my job now to begin addressing those things, addressing the fact that the per capita income of an African American family is dramatically less on average in this country than the per capita income of a white family, than the average income of a white family. Looking at the concept of Black Lives Matter, there's Black Lives Matter organization, and I would challenge folks who are concerned about that to actually look at the website of Black Lives Matter, read through it, because there are lots of things being said about it, and I think I would suggest looking at facts, and also to remember that from the standpoint that really white Americans, and this is a hard statement. It's one it took me a long time to get used to saying or to believe, to be able to bring into myself, that I don't have the right or the responsibility to give a member of the Black community permission for how they respond to what has been done to them or to their ancestors. But I think to address it, to first of all be honest, to say there are political views, there are opposing views here, but to begin with what Jesus said, and to take and to address the issues in small enough portions that you can take one step at a time. It took a long time for these things to be broken, for these systems to be broken. It's going to take a long time to fix them. So I think recognizing that, I think also there's also a document that came out of General Assembly a number of years ago about addressing issues where we disagree, having some community agreements that, if you feel like you're about to start yelling about something, take a break. Just, if the weather's right, take a walk around the building. But recognize that there's a lot of emotion and that there's been a lot of pain. So small steps, agreements to be civil, and also working from facts, not just what we've heard on whether it's a newscast from whatever network, or from our neighbor down the street, but to actually go from facts. I don't know if that helps. But.
Yeah, that is helpful. Thank you. Does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask? What is the all right, well, I know the end goal is to eradicate systemic poverty, dismantle structural racism.
Mm-hmm.
What would the PCUSA see as a success of the invitation? I mean, short of, dismantling racism entirely.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how that's measured, but I think I think, and I may be speaking, beyond my security clearance, but my thought is that success is that we're all working on it, that we're all with working with integrity to address these issues, that we are learning enough about ourselves and each other and building enough trust that when we mess up and when we step in something, that someone can immediately say, hey, wait a minute, you overstepped there. I mean, I catch myself sometimes because I do a lot of writing, finding myself giving permission. These folks believe this, these folks rightfully believe this. Well, rightfully is me giving permission. That's not my right. So, but I have some colleagues who don't mind calling me and saying, hey, you need to rework that. Or who I usually send things to them and say, okay, did I say anything stupid here? Did I step in anything? And if I did, they'll tell me. And they'll, we have a good enough relationship that we can work through those things. But I think that we are all working with integrity to address the issues, that we're trusting each other to correct each other when we do mess up, and that we can continue coming together to the table, and that's where we meet.
Thank you. And we're recording this, so if you want to show this to Diane Moffat and see if you did anything wrong, right there on our website for you. Oh, here's a good question from Eric, and I'm gonna say, Bill, I'm glad for you to answer this, but also I'll encourage other folks on this call to think about this too, and if you've got something in mind, I'd really want to hear that too. What would we be doing differently if we are a Matthew 25 church? So Bill, you don't know everything we're doing, obviously, no. but so I'll generalize the question for you. How does a Matthew 25 congregation look different from a garden variety PCUSA congregation? And then for other folks on this call, what would you like to see at Covenant that would mean that we are a Matthew 25 church? We have different things that we do that I think fall in line with being a Matthew 25 church, but what's different about accepting the invitation for us?
Well, I would say a couple things. First of all, intentionality. Lots of churches are doing lots of things, so it's a way to organize what we're doing, to organize the ministries, and we have to be honest. There are sometimes ministries that have outlived their usefulness, but we're afraid to let them go on so that something else can grow in their place. So I think it's intentionality. The other thing that I see from congregations, and my own session did this when we were talking about Matthew 25, was to one of our elders said, well, if we accept this invitation and we put this logo on our website, what are we going to do 2 years from now if we look back at it and say, we really aren't living up to what we thought we were going to be living up to anymore? So I see it as a way to hold ourselves accountable. So intentionality and accountability would be my two. But I'd love to hear what your folks think.
Me too. Yeah, Chris, you can, this will be an open sharing, so
okay.
Just go ahead and.
Sorry, I'm on the school board. I'm used to like raising my hand and having someone call on me. So I'm just thinking, on the mission committee, we've been grappling with this for a long time, is that we do all these pieces of things, and it's very like action oriented with different organizations we work with, and different people coordinate these different action items. And I think we've discussed it for a while, is how do we organize these, or how do we need to let go of some of the smaller pieces or projects to do something more specifically and more targeted, or how do you put all of these pieces together? And so I guess I'm interested, you know, from the aspect of how would this help us focus and organize what we're doing and find a place for all these pieces and not to say a purpose for it, because I think, you know, most of the things that are running through the mission committee have a really important work, and we're supporting a lot of community organizations that are out doing work. You know, we're not always the ones doing the work, but we're supporting other people's work as well. And so I'm just interested in this from the context of, will it help us focus, and will it help us be more effective in all of the pieces that we're doing?
Yeah, sort of addition by subtraction.
Right. I mean, I don't have an answer for that. But yeah, that's just sort of when I'm thinking about it. Yeah, would it help us?
Yeah, Ernie, I see your hand up, and then Jim. I guess people are raising their hands. Ernie, you're muted right now. So I'm going to ask to unmute you, and then Jim, I saw your hand up as well.
Go ahead, Arnie. Oh, he's muted.
He's muted, yeah. Sorry, Ernie, you're.
Jeff, I just wanted to say, related, I think, somewhat to what Chris said. She was talking about pulling together our various pieces. My work over the years with nonprofits has been, do you cut up a lot of little pieces and have those people that want to provide meals, and those people that want to help the homeless. It seems to me the large question that this Matthew project invites to me is, it doesn't seem to be an effort to get churches to enhance or enlarge or intensify what they're focused on, but rather to focus on lots of different pieces. Can you help me with that, Bill?
One of the things that a lot of churches are addressing is, you know, we've got 45 different organizations that we give, for example, that we give $1,000 a year to. So is that effective, or should we be giving, you know, $10,000 a year to 5 organizations?
That's the issue I was hoping.
And I've been, you know, lots of congregations are having that issue. I think what we're trying not to tell congregations what to do, but to use the Matthew 25 framework as a way to organize what you're doing, so that if you've got people who are committed to the food pantry and to feeding the homeless, are there others who are feeding those who have need? Are there others who have interest, whether that's with housing in your community, or you know, redlining issues of working with banks and loan organizations to in terms of determining where people of various races end up living, and could all of those people be coordinated together to work on that particular issue of poverty from a number of different angles, because each one of the angles is important. So I don't know. I see it as helping organize.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ernie, are you able, Deb, I see you. Ernie, are you thumbs up, thumbs down, able to unmute yourself? We can't hear you, unfortunately. And I am not able to manually unmute you. I'm sorry, Ernie. There you go.
There he goes.
Unmuted now.
You hear me?
Yes, there we go. Wonderful.
There you go.
Oh, I didn't know whether to hit mute or unmute. Is it unmute? All right. I mean, I know it's very late, but regarding systemic poverty, probably one of the most powerful forces in every one of our lives is the sex drive. And the sex drive, if it is not controlled in some way, for example, with birth control, and the advertising the benefits of birth control, It's going to affect people of systemic poverty far more than anyone else. But it also, of course, affects presidents, and I don't have to mention one. Is there any, does this have any connection at all with approaching systemic poverty from that angle?
Well, the church over the years has published some guidelines is the wrong word, but accepted some overtures from various presbyteries about issues of reproductive rights and that sort of thing. We've not intentionally included any of those things within the Matthew 25 materials, and really looking at congregations for determining in their own communities how those things impact the various issues of the invitation. I don't have a real good answer on that, but I think that's where I would start, would be to look at your own community, and how is the church working with folks in your community to address issues of poverty on all levels.
Thank you. And then I just looked at the time. It is 11 o'clock. So Deb, I'm going to ask you, you're more than welcome. I said you can ask the question. So please do. And then we will close after Deb's question.
Bill, I'm just wondering whether the congregations who have decided to become Matthew 25 congregations have chosen one of these foci, I guess, dismantling structural racism, or eradicating systematic poverty, or building congregational vitality. Has the National Church encouraged them to choose focus?
We would, the what we've structured is, of course, all three of those focuses are available. Some churches have chosen to focus on all three. Some have chosen one or two. So it's really up to the congregation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well,
I'm curious about how many congregations have chosen each, and I don't, and I'm sure somebody has those statistics, but I don't, and that's something I need to dig into and find.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being here, for your thoughtful questions, for your prayerful consideration of where God is calling Covenant to be, and especially thank you, Bill. Your support of our ministry, your support of ministry in God's church, it strengthens Christ's body and makes us and God's kingdom a better place, makes it more imminent now than it was before. So thank you for your ministry and for being here with us today.
Glad to be here. If there's anything else I can do, Jeff, you know how to find me. So feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call.
I do, and I will, and push my gratitude up the food chain as well. I've through all of this, I have felt the support of the denomination. It's very clear that as a denomination, we care about what we are doing through the big picture stuff, but also working with churches. So thank you. And so let us close with prayer. We are still giving out donuts until 11:30. So if you are less than a half hour away from the church, stop on by and pick up the donuts. That means Arizona may be a little far away. Louisville's probably outside of our delivery area, but
that's okay. I grew up in the home of Krispy Kreme donuts.
Ooh.
And I'll just say that I owe my girlish figure to them.
Very good. Well, we've got some Greenbush here, so.
And I learned about Kringle when I was talking with some folks in North Dakota. So anyway.
Somebody will have to drop that off.
They're going to destroy my waistline.
Very good. Well, let's close in prayer. Holy and wonderful God, you provide us with constant reminders of your deep, abiding presence. presence in and among one another, but especially in and amongst those whose society places on the margins. Help us to recenter our thinking outwards. Help us to show compassion and care. Open our eyes, open our hearts, and guide us in the ways of justice, peace, and love. Amen. Thank you all so much. This is wonderful. Very blessed. And see you all for donuts, and I will see you all on some various Sunday from here or there. Thanks again, Bill.
All right, have a great day.
You too.